Alrighty, g'day guys and gals. I've got that many windows open today, I don't know what's going on. I'm a little hell of a loss today. Okay, so look. I did promise that I would be doing something to do with Arknights. I don't really know if I elaborated on it. But what I am doing is I'm kind of doing like a middle ground for new / free to play doctors who may not have that sort of freedom, I guess, that people who are willing to throw some money at the game may have. You know, outside of maybe just buying outfits. That said, you're a doctor, you've been yanked out of your fridge, you've fought your way through Chernobog, and Frost Nova's freezing the whole bloody place up and you think you're back in your fridge. So that's about where we're at with what I'm doing today. So this is going to be a really scuffed, dodgy, but hopefully, because I have left chat open for everybody who is interested, just to ask questions as we go. So I'll be going through each sort of the main common operator archetypes, poking through all of those, and I'll be giving you my personal opinion. And I kind of want to emphasize the my personal opinion thing because a lot of what goes on is sort of dependent on how you play as a Doktah. So what works for me may not necessarily work for you. What I prefer may not be what you personally prefer. I've had these conversations previously in Arknights when I've just been out discussing it with people. The arguments of proactive versus reactive healers, which is something I'll touch base on when I get down to the healing tanks. But yeah, so this is kind of just a very general guide, a very general idea, so that you can sort of set yourself out and have some understanding of which operators you should probably consider or you should probably go for, because once you get out of those 3 stars and you start expanding into the 4s and 5s, a lot can get lost in translation. A lot of the new archetypes or differing archetypes in that batch can throw newer players up, and it can be a little confusing for some people. So that's why I'm sort of touching base on the set archetypes. I'm gonna try and avoid a lot of other things that have a lot of you can use this or this because blah blah blah. There will obviously be comparisons, but when the comparisons are, if you need arts you should do this, or if you need of the same art, of the same type. So say ranged guards, for example. I'm not going to touch base on all of the ranged guards because all of the ranged guards tend to do something different. The bulk of them are used for different situations, so I won't be touching base on them, just because there's no point in me sitting here going, oh, you should do this for this, or but you should also do that for that. For that particular example, I have actually at the very end cobbled together just some basics, sort of like the best of a mixed bag of each different, well, not each different, but those particular archetypes that I was talking about. That aside, as I said, if you've got questions as we go along, chat is willing and open. I will stop for you guys as I see the questions. Try and keep the questions to, what we're on at the time. But other than that, I'll get into it now. So I'm not too sure how long this will go for. I'm not too sure, based on how long it took me to cobble all this together, if I'll split this video or not. However, I am archiving it on YouTube for you guys who get in late. and I will do my best to add timestamps on the YouTube video this time, so you guys who are watching it again actually can just skip through if you're looking for something specific. So obviously, as you can see just from what you've got in front of you at the moment, this is really bare bones. It's not going into detail their skill set or anything else like that. It's just these are your three arts guards. So I'll do the introductions for this particular setup on these arts guards that we have in front of us. So first and foremost, we've got Moose, Astesia, Acidaroka. I've added the stars so you guys know what star they are. So Moose 4-star, Astesia 5-star, Acidaroka 5-star. There won't be any 6 stars in this video because, like I said, this is for free-to-play / newer doctors. And typically, if a newer doctor gets a 6-star, they're probably going to invest in that 6-star. Most of the 6 stars are the king or queen, as it were, of their particular archetype. Some exceptions do occur, but typically that's the way it is. So we'll start off with Moose. Moose is a 4-star. She's fairly easy to get, so that's why I've got her listed as best alternative. She does great single target damage, and that's simply just because of her talent, which allows for the second hit. She has an on-hit charging attack, so the standard it's 5 hits, then it does an extra 60% damage. At its highest, it goes up to 4 hits, and then the 5th will do the extra damage and the lower attack. So Moose is a good starter. I'm not going to argue against her. However, if you roll Astesia or get Astesia out of something, as you see, Astesia's got the top pick. And that's simply because you'll get far more longevity out of Astesia versus Moose. What Moose does, Astesia can do, and a little bit more. Because of Moose's RNG basis, because it's a percentage chance that she may hit twice, which, comes down to it. Which is what decides it, I should say, not comes down to it. So we've got, at her absolute maximum, it's a 23% chance to attack twice. So 23% chance, let's just argue a 5th. That can go either way for you. Anybody who's played certain other MMOs know that even a high percentage is not necessarily a great percentage, just on the basis of the fact that it is a percentage. So every single time she swings, that dice rolls, and whether it rolls your number is up in the air. It's not for you to decide. So me personally, I don't like bargaining my operators on percentage chances unless those percentages are particularly great. Now, Astesia, because of her skill set, which also increases her block number, her block values, so she can block 2 targets with skill 2. Skill 2 has great uptime, it cycles fairly quickly, and skill 2 is in nearly every single aspect superior to her skill 1, so funnily enough, a lot of operators are like that. It's the why would you take skill 2 when you could take skill 1? That's not something I'm going to get into. Her talent typically covers the damage difference that Moose does ahead of her. So the bottom line is that in most instances, you're better off investing your resources and materials into leveling Astesia over Moose if you get her. If you're stuck for a long time and you just don't get her and Moose is slowly creeping up because you've needed her, then, by all means. This guide is more towards the E2 investment than, base and E1, because that's where we really want to start. Well, that's where the big investment is the investment into E2. So that's kind of where I want to throw this at you and say, well, you could use Moose, but in the long run, you're going to get more out of Astesia. So that's the bottom line there. Sidoroka, for what she's worth, she is an arts guard, but she's a completely different type of arts guard. She's standalone. Her skill 2, which is better than her skill 1, her skill 1 is just a flat self-heal. She's kind of the arts equivalent of Matoimaru. So, for that particular reason, Sidoroka is not one that I would invest in. She was a free operator. So, most people who were playing around that time would have her. Different potential levels, obviously, depending on how new you were at the time. The big issue with Sidoroka is that her skill 2, which is her offensive skill, as I've just mentioned, her skill 1 is self-heal. So her skill 2, which is her offensive skill, actually locks her damage dealing to her own placed tile. So she can't attack the tile in front of her like most other guards can, which makes her completely useless unless something is on top of her. Ergo, she's pointless by comparison of Astesia or Moose if you have to pick one. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Astesia boosts her own attack and defense with both of her skills, so that's another reason to go her over Moose, because that means that you can actually use her as sort of like a light tanky position against whatever you may need to use her against. And she does work quite well in tandem with some of the guards that do actually increase adjacent operator stats. We'll get to those defenders a bit later, but you will, in the long haul, get more out of bringing Astesia to E2 than Moose. So if it gets to that point and you've got Astesia, sweet as, take her up to E2. If you don't, then you may have to level Moose. I'm not going to tell you you should. It's really going to come down to how badly you need that arts guard. So, moving on to the next page, we have our AoE guards. Our AoE guards basically come down to a Stealth Inspector. So obviously the 3-star in that particular field is Popika. And I've also left out Savage from this particular one because Savage is a very limited operator. So I'm not going to touch base on her. That and her potential is still locked low. So she doesn't really compare to the other AoE guards on this list. I've also left out Broca because Broca is not a flat physical AoE. He's physical while he's auto-attacking. Both of his skills are arts, so you could consider him an arts AoE guard. Ergo, yeah, it's, you know, I can't really put him next to 2 physical AoE guards. I can't in good conscience do that. So most people know about Spectre. Her skill 2 makes her invulnerable, but applies a ludicrously long stun afterwards, which if she's not tanking is fine because, you know, she's just going to flop next to your defender. If she is blocking, obviously that's going to be terrible. 10 seconds is a hell of a long time for an operator to go dark. So that's one thing that you really want to take into consideration. But that said, if you are going to be using her in that capacity, you're probably just going to be using skill 1 anyway. Her actual talents are as amazing as you could ever ask for from something like that. She is a survival archetype. So it's her max health goes up and she restores hit points in her E2. So obviously she is fairly self-dependent, which makes her fantastic. You can give her a lackluster healer and she'll be fairly comfortable on her own. If you get worried about her and you've got skill 2, pop the skill 2. Obviously you won't want her in that sort of capacity when she goes down for 10 seconds. Estelle being the only alternative is the best alternative. Estelle is far more... I don't want to use the word survival because that's technically the category that Spectre is in, so saying survival is not great. But she is, as long as she's killing things, she's happy to stay alive because she will restore health with each kill. And the 8 tiles around her, so her entire surroundings, not just the 4 tiles as some are. Her only real downside is that she can't be healed during her skill 2 uptime. The flip side to that is that she does regen far more hit points when things die around her, so it's a trade-off. But most people have Spectre. Even since I started playing, I've never really seen a great shortage of people with Spectre. So the odds that you will get Spectre or already have her just sitting somewhere are probably pretty high. So obviously, Spectre is my first pick for that. I personally think she just has far more utility in the long haul because Estelle's health sort of relies on her killing things. Yeah, she can be healed in between her skill 2 use, but hinging on that in crisis, in little quotey things, it's probably not the greatest thing. Whereas Spectre can sit there, she can hold her own, she does self-regenerate. So in that essence, she's semi... what's the word I'm after? She looks after herself, and that lightens the load on your healers, which, you know, then it just rolls all backwards from there, so that's the benefit of using Spectre over Estelle. It's not to say Estelle is bad. I don't ever want anybody to think that Estelle is bad, but once again, if you've got your Estelle at E160 and you've got Spectre, Spectre's the one you want to take through to E2, just because Spectre will give you more, again, out of the long run. So moving on, next we have our AoE casters. So area effect casters. Now, Katana is one that gets introduced nice and early. Her skill 2 has an expanded range, which does actually play into quite a number of things. It makes her extremely good in that essence, but she does get stunned afterwards, so that's the downside. But it's not a it's not a painful stun. It's not something that's going to cripple you. Her being a ranged operator, so she won't be blocking in most instances, 99% of cases, means that obviously nothing is going to quote-unquote leak through. But she also, if you just have a lot of stuff, you can also just use skill 1, which increases her attack speed. The downsides of Katana, though, is that when she deploys, she will get one of 3 buffs, self-buffs. You have no control over those 3 buffs. So what you get, and one of them is a health buff. So that's really horrible. I understand in essence, if you look at it at face value, it's something for nothing. So you get one of 3 buffs, 2 of them are offensive buffs and one of them is a health buff. So you can look at it like that. You get something for nothing. But the downside is that something could be better used for someone else. And that's where it really breaks down to that sort of desire to have something a little bit more reliable. And that's, again, this is where my opinion plays into it. I just don't like deploying an offensive operator and they get a health buff. You know, if I wanted a healthy operator, I'd probably pick my operators a bit more carefully. So, whereas with the other 2, their talents are a lot more reliable. So, Leonhardt is a damage increase depending on how much is in his area of attack. and Skyfire is a damage increase of blocked enemies. So I know both of those are going to benefit from those. They benefit offensively. If I deploy Katana, there's a 33% chance she's going to get a health buff. What do I want a health buff for? Like I said, if I wanted a health buff, I'd probably be a bit more selective about my operators. As I said, the skill 2 stuns Katana after use. It's not horrible. It's a long stun, 10 seconds, but it's not horrible because she's typically not in a position where she'll be blocking something. Skyfire is my top pick, and that's simply because A, she has a reliable talent. You know what she's getting, which is the increase to damage, the increase to damage of blocked enemies. So she just, anything that's at your defender wall, she's just going to flog for 18%. Yes, 18% more. And that is a map-wide buff. So she increases the arts damage against all enemies blocked. It's not her personally, it is every single arts operator you have. So if you've got, say, Amariyah there, pelting them with little balls of whatever the hell those little dark balls are, Skyfire's talent affects that. As long as they're blocked, the talent works. Skill 2 has a stun effect. It slows down her attack, but it gives her a stun effect. Now, in many instances, I have hinged on this stun effect simply because of the crowd control. It makes a hell of a lot of things manageable, and it's not a percentile stun. It is a stun. It's not one of those things like other operators have where it's like it has a 20% chance to stun an enemy. Nope. When that meteor comes down, everything that gets hit is getting stunned. And you can rely on that, and any time that something can't be stunned, you typically know it beforehand anyway. The second part of it is that her skill 2 has an immensely comfortable both uptime and recycle. It's very rare that I'm sitting there on Skyfire going, come on, come on, come on, I need the skill. It has happened, not gonna lie, but it's very rare that Skyfire's skill is so tightly cycling that I'm panicking about it. The last one is Leonhardt, who is classified as a nuker. Now nukers work both ways. They're typically very one trick, but at the same time, they usually do that trick so damn well, it's not funny. So as I said, Leonhardt's talent increases his damage substantially depending on how many targets are in his attack range. Ergo, as I've stated here, you see, needs specific circumstances to shine. His skill 2 has the same range as Katana, and it's just a one hit. So you click it, it hits, and it stacks twice. So he can hold 2 stacks of that skill. He really only shines when you're using arts heavy teams because of how his skills work. And that's why I've given him the little flick in this particular instance, because unfortunately, he's just too specialized. That's what I'm after. He does one job, he does it amazingly well, but unfortunately that one job is not really going to help you carry through. Obviously there are instances where it will, but typically Skyfire is where you should go. Understandably, as I said, Katana is very easy to get, so most people will have Katana. But again, once, as I've been saying, if you get to that E2 sort of border level, if you've got Skyfire, take her through because she will get far more use out of Katana. That extra range on the E2 is not fantastic. It helps in certain situations. It allows her a little bit more leeway, but for the most part, she does nothing that Skyfire can't. In fact, Skyfire technically does it better, or probably does it better just on the basis that she has a stun attributed to her skill 2. So, as I said, if you've got Katana, fair enough. If you've got Skyfire, take her through because she is the one who you will hinge on And to be entirely honest, I typically, like, if we go all the way up, Mostima is the 6-star in this particular tree, or archetype, I should say. I use Skyfire over Mostima most of the time. I won't lie to anybody. Mostima's skills, while they're fantastic in their own right, they tend to have a ridiculously long recycle time. I don't think that Mostima really does as good a job as in the crowd control department as Skyfire, because even if you're using Mostima's second skill, which is just a stationary stun, I think it's only like 6 seconds. She attacks the same area for 6 seconds and then that's it. That's the thing over. Whereas Skyfire, while she does space out those stuns, the stuns last for a significantly longer time, which means that even if stuff is getting blocked and it's up against a wall, she will be stunning them as they're going, which, you know, that sort of situation can play into your hands. So you'll notice too that I have not included Grey. Grey is unique in that he is a AoE damage dealer with a slow. So that's why I haven't included him. He's slightly different in that respect. He trades off a lot of his attack for the slow that he has. So I'm leaving him out simply because he plays into a different sort of scenario. He's one of those operators that drops into a different space altogether. So I'm not saying don't level Grey, but he, in my opinion, does not sit in with the direct AoE damage dealers, which are the 3 that I've got in front of you. So moving on, the next batch are the single targets. The single target arts dealers you're introduced to on day 1. One of them pulls you out of the fridge, and that's Amariyah, who is the top pick. And hello, Blue. We are going through and having a discussion on which way you should go for leveling stuff. So I'm just throwing out options for the newer Doctors so they have a little bit of direction, or if you're free to play and you're a little bit on the limited resources side, you've got, again, that same direction. So you start off with Amariyah. Amariyah is my top pick. As I said, there's no 6 stars, so we're not going to touch Kirby or Yafyala. Amariyah is given to you. Amariyah is a 5-star. You'll rely on Amariyah for a hell of a long time and beyond. And that's simply because she has great stats, she does great damage, and she's free. You will need to take Amariyah to E2 regardless of what you decide you want to do. So if you are fix that up. So if you are, I forgot where I was now. You will need to take her to E2 to get her guard form at the end of chapter 8. So whether you like it or not, even if you get, say, Yafyala or Koyobi, you'll still be wanting to take Amariyah through. I actually think it's a requirement in chapter 8, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have Amariyah guard, I think, or Amariyah at E2. So I'm fairly certain it's a requirement. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure whether it's Amariyah guard or if it's just Amariyah E2. But either way, you will need her at E2. So obviously Amariyah gets the top pick on that one. Moving backwards, now that I've talked about Amariyah, Haze is our best alternative. Haze is a 4-star. She has immense single target potential. Many would argue that her single target potential is better than Amariyah, obviously excluding her skill 3 because it deals true damage. But it's simply because her skill 2, under the assumption that she's not going to get hit by anything, shreds her hit points down by 75%, but increases her attack and her attack speed. As a single target operator, Amariyah doesn't really have anything that compares to that. Her skill 2 can do more single target damage, but the trade-off is that you have no control over where the damage goes. So if there's any other enemies in that space, the damage will split. So in a controlled environment, Amariyah can still do more damage, but in an uncontrolled environment, Haze is the better option, simply because typically you can direct where the damage goes. I'm not going to say you click on Haze and say, hey, attack this, but you're not going to worry about Amariyah's damage splitting into X targets. 6 targets I think it can hit up to, or 7. I'm not sure what the maximum is. However many bolts is however many targets it'll hit. But again, you have no control over that. Moving along, Absinthe is a very niche operator. She does one trick and she does it reasonably well. But the problem is that both of her skills sort of don't really fit into that trick, unfortunately. So her talent, in case you're unfamiliar, is that she increases damage dealt to enemies below 40% by however much, depending on where it's at. And oddly enough, her skill 2 won't let her attack enemies. Maybe I've got that wrong. Yeah, I have got that wrong anyway. So, scratch what I've said there. So, skill 1 is an unlimited duration attack. She prioritizes enemies with the lowest amount of health, which does play into her talent. I've absolutely misread that. I thought there was something funny when I was doing that, and I just couldn't put my head on it. But I've been doing this for so long that... Whoops! So the second one is that each attack turns into a burst of 4 shells, dealing damage, but it doesn't attack enemies over 50. Well, it starts at 50%, at level 7 it's 75%, and it just gets higher from there. No, it's 50%, sorry. Again, I'm reading the wrong thing. Derp. So she absolutely will not attack enemies below 50%. Which is entirely pointless if she's anywhere near a front line, because she'll just be standing there when that skill is active. So in essence, I suppose you could say that it does not play into her talent usage, because she's just going to stand there. It's not what I meant when I put this in, but it's something to consider that in many instances, Absinthe may be standing there doing nothing. Or auto-attacking, or, you know, it's very easy for something to go awry when you've got that sort of requirement during a skill. If something dies and everything else has been hammering, like you've got a whole bunch of single target damage, so everything's been hammering it and Absinthe is there, she's not going to attack anything. She's just going to stand there and the skill's just going to be sitting there idle. So you can stitch yourself up very easily with that. So anything under 50%, she does it very well, but anything above 50%, Absinthe is not who you want to be going for. Last but not least, look, Click is an operator that a lot of people tell me to look into. I did finally look into Click. And unfortunately, I personally was very disappointed. I'll get crucified for that, but that's okay. Looks Click's skill 2, which is what you want to hinge on for the entirety of everything, is a drone which will follow a target around, pew-pewing it until the target dies or the skill expires. The drone's damage ramps up over time, and in turn, Click's damage ramps up over time. That is Click's only benefit, is that the drone damage ramps up and it has a chance to stun. That's it. There's no other benefit to it, and the drone follows it out of her attack area. Outside of that, if you put it next to anyone else, even Absinthe on this list, her damage is laughable, like comical even. So it's very hard for me personally to justify Click. I see a lot of people try and justify her with various different bits and bobs and modifications or boosting. The problem is that if you're planning on using Click effectively, you kind of got to build around her. And in most cases, you don't particularly want to build around an operator unless you've got a solid reason to. And an operator that does bugger all damage is not an operator you want to be building around anyway. She has a very novelty ability. I won't take that away from her. There are instances where that ability may be useful, but because you can't actually target the drone, it goes as sideways as possible anyway, or it can go as sideways as possible anyway. So that's something to keep in mind. I've used her now. I did definitely try to use her in a situation where I thought she would shine, but unfortunately, she did not shine. She disappointed me thoroughly. Her woeful damage let me down, and I ended up replacing her with somebody else. So I think I just ended up replacing her with a regular slower. So sorry. Click, you get the I showed up award. That's about it. That's all I can do for you. So, speaking of regular slowers, I've just brought in the regular slowers. So, this one is where the arguments proper will probably start to begin. And the basis on that is, a lot of this is personal preference. Padenko has got my top pick with Istina as the best alternative. The bottom line of the slowers is that Angelina is king. There's no if, buts, or maybes about that. Angelina is the king of the slowers. That's not up for debate. That's not up for anything. The only one who probably maybe has an argument against her is Glossus, and that's simply because Glossus actually has a niche, whereas the others don't. So Padenko actually plays two roles. So she can be a healer with skill 1, or she can be an AoE damage dealer with skill 2. So it gives her a little bit more versatility for you guys, and that's why I've given her the top pick over Istina. And I just need to clear my throat. I'll just mute my mic. So the AoE, her skill 2, Padenko's skill 2, actually throws a little vial of questionable substance, and anything in the vial, anything in that little vial's explosion area takes an arts dot and slows. Listen here, you. Did I spell that wrong? Rip. Don't bully my typos. Did I spell that wrong? Please don't tell me I spelled that wrong. You're making me nervous. Oh, it is. No. Alright. I'm sorry. I spelled that wrong. This is live. You get to see all my cock-ups nice and live here. That's alright. I'll just scribble it out. I'll scribble a pen over the top of it and do a C. She is sus. She does drone damage. She's unique. Anyway, Padenko's little AoE vial of substance is... I was tired, alright? Don't bully me. Padenko's little thing is an AoE slow, which is fantastic. It's semi-unique in a sense that it is a true AoE. And the longer things stay in that little vial, gas cloud thing, I'm not really sure how you want to really describe it, but anyway. The longer they take damage. That's just the simple fact. If they get stuck in there for whatever reason, if you throw it against a tank wall, they'll just continue to take damage. And for that, and the fact that she can double as a healer, if you guys have watched today's contingency contract, you'll notice that healers were a rarity, unfortunately. So Padenko, for example, can fill that role and still do damage. So that's fantastic. Glossus, as I said, prioritizes drones, or Glossas. Thank you, Blue. Her niche is drones, so I can't actually give it to her because while she does have a nice skill 1, which hits 2 targets, and a fantastic skill 2, which has a massive range, the problem is that she only truly shines against drones. So I'm not going to tell you she's bad, because she's not bad. She's quite good, but her niche is drones. Istina is weird. She's a nutcase, alright? Everything, or nearly everything she does increases her attack speed, which is crazy. As you see, I said skill 1 is just pew pew pew, and that's because her talent increases her attack speed at the cost of health? Maybe defense. Hang on, let me double check before I start talking shite. Okay, it's defense, it's not health, don't panic. So she's still got health, she just has no defense, so anything can push her over. That said, skill 1 increases that attack speed even further. So she just throws little slowy bolts at everybody for forever. I did do pew pew pew, and I didn't do da 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 da. It did cross my mind, but I thought against it. I didn't want to take that away from Kirby. Skill 2 has a massive expanded range. It hits 2 additional targets, total 3. It's actually a really interesting AoE. So that's her skill 2 is exactly why I give her the best alternative. The bottom line, however, is that a slower is a slower, and Padenko simply does the job as well as anybody else. Last on the list is Earth Spirit, who is one of the one-trick ponies. She slows, and she slows. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. She doesn't do anything else. She just slows. She does slow very well. If you need something slowed, she'll do it. She'll do it probably better than anybody else. But that's all she's going to do for you. So that's something to keep in mind. So next up, our single target healers. So starting off, we've got Myrrh, and you'll also notice I still only have a top pick and a best alternative. Sometimes you do need 3 single target healers, but by that point in time, usually the third you're bringing is just for a purpose, and that's it. So Myrrh is one that I think you start with Myrrh, or you get her as you're playing through the first chapter. Myrrh is unique in that she can heal 2 targets at a time, so she's sort of a Forks AoE. Both skills play into this. The first one is just an over time one where she'll just eventually throw out 2 healing potions, and her skill 2 is her skill 2 forces the dual healing. Myrrh is fantastic in that she heals all deployed operators when she is deployed. So if you're running tight on slow deployment point maps, and things are dying, you're really struggling for deployment points, you can bring in Myrrh, drop her in, and it's quite a decent heal actually. She heals everything once she's deployed, and then she'll go about her business. The downside of Mer, though, is that both of her skills have disgustingly high skill point requirements, and that's really shortchanges her great capacity. I would rate Mer significantly higher if her skill 1 and 2 had, I don't know, just a little bit of a... Well, her skill 1 needs just a little bit of a drop because I think it's 6 or 7 seconds. Skill 2 is up there towards a minute. So if you sort of drop those down a fair bit, so dropped it down, her skill 1 down to say 5 seconds and a skill 2 down to say 40, she'd be fantastic. But unfortunately that's not the case, and that is where Mer comes up short. Next through is my top pick, who is Silence. Silence skill 2 has drones, allows her to deploy drones which do AoE heals. You can deploy those drones on any tile on the map, assuming it's not occupied by a friendly unit, and assuming it is a deployable tile. And her talent, which is an attack speed increase of all healers across the board as long as she's on the map. So her talent is incredibly useful in absolutely all situations. And that's why Silence gets my top pick. You cannot go past Silence. Her skill 2, her drones come in exceptionally handy. There's really no downside to bringing Silence. Gavial is next up, and she's another 4-star I believe you get quite early on. Her talent buff is another deploy buff. It's quite good for while it lasts. The problem is it only lasts 15 seconds, so it doesn't have huge longevity. So dropping it, for a boss fight or something is probably not the way it's going to work out for you. That said, while it's active, it's quite nice, but, you can't really organize a healer around a deploy talent. Gavial, as many people say, she's a defender in a healer slot or a guard in a healer slot. Simply because of her survivability. She has great survivability stats. So on those maps where you've got, say, a lot of AoE damage, Gavial's your girl. She will take a lot less damage and therefore hopefully not get poleaxed by an AoE attack. Much the same as Mer, though, her downfall comes from her skill point requirements. Her skills, which are both heal over times, are just... It's the exact same problem Mer has. They would be fantastic skills if the if the skill point requirements were lower. On very controlled maps, both Gavial and Mer will do their job outstandingly. On maps that aren't heavily controlled and they're just big waves or big constant damage, Gavial and Mer really struggle. And unfortunately, that's why I can't give them even an honorable mention. Warfarin's up next, however, and Warfarin is another operator I really like. Warfarin is just a straight healer. She is as flat a healer as you'll get with her skill 1. Deploy her anywhere with her area of attack over the front line where things are dying, and her skills will cycle quicker because she gets skill points as things die in her attack field. Skill 1 stacks up to 3 times and is just a flat burst heal when something drops below 50%. It's very similar to the healing defenders, but it adds a little bit extra to her regular heal, which is great if you've got those big chunky enemies that just do huge amounts of damage but don't follow up with anything significant afterwards. Warfarin can deal with that easily, and quite happily, because in that particular essence, she's in her element. Skill 2 is just a buff which makes things more annoying and dead than they already are. It's a attack point buff which basically shreds her own health and buffs a random ally in range, which can work both ways. If you've got multiple allies in range, that can cause problems. And if you've actually deployed in a way that can allow her to target a single operator, Well, the problem there is that she's probably not going to be getting use out of her talent. So that's a double-edged sword. And that's where the next point comes into, that skill 2 can be unreliable. If you've got multiple operators in her attack range, you have no control over which one she decides to boost. She will just do whatever she wants, and that's the bottom line of it. Last but not least is Suzuran, who is our best alternative to silence. Suzuran is an outstanding healer, full stop. Her talent is rubbish because typically you won't be using her in where that talent shines, which is increased healing on targets under 10 deployment points, which is nothing useful. She's very squishy, but that is because she has outstanding offensive attack points healing capacity. Combine that with skill 2, which increases the attack and attack speed. She can keep up with any of these healers, including the 6 stars. The only one that she probably would really fall apart on as far as really just beating them would be Shining with skill 1, because Shining with skill 1 increases her attack speed as well, so... I don't think Mountain actually drops below 10. Let me just double check just to test that theory for you. Its deployment costs no more than 10, and Mountain is, let's have a look. Mountain is 11. So it doesn't affect Mountain. Mountain just squeezes outside of that. You could say... Yeah. I mean, you're right. She does actually keep some of the brawlers alive. Some of the brawlers do have, survivability traits. Just trying to think of a name. Indra. Indra would be okay because her skill 2 obviously has a heal applied to it, so Suzuran and Indra would make a decent group, I guess. But yeah, so as I said, her talent is largely useless, but that doesn't take away from the fact that her healing stats are fantastic. So Suzuran will happily go through the entire game with you for the most part, or where we're at the moment. As long as she doesn't get hit by an AoE. If she gets hit by an AoE, well, God help you. That's the cost of being attack stat heavy in the 4-star area. Now, the interesting part on this next lot is the pullers. You'll notice that Rope, the 4-star, is my top pick. Which I think a lot of people will find particularly interesting, given that typically I've gone for the 5 stars as the top picks. The reason for that is that Rope skill 2 has expanded range. That's it. It attacks an extra tile in length, and none of the others do that, and there are situations where you need that extra length. As no other puller actually has that extra length, I can't actually sit there and, talk up Cliffheart or Snow Saint, because simply they cannot do the job. So for once, you've got a nice cheap 4-star that she can take through to E2, and she will do the job that is required of her. The best alternative I've given to Cliffheart, because her skill 2 deals true damage. Second to that, her talent increases her attack and defense, that is if she's not blocking anything. And although I tried my best to avoid this, I couldn't really run any other sort of justification on it. There are contingency contracts where I have used Cliffheart exclusively for the true damage. end the stun. It's just a way to cheese sort of things that move past. She does a little extra damage because she won't be blocking something, so I've used her as a delayer in where I can't use slowers. Snow Saint unfortunately gets the short stick because she has fairly useless talents. She does increase damage, I think it is, to infected creatures. That's the requirement. They have to be infected creatures. Not infected enemies, infected creatures. So Originium slugs. That really limits Snow Saint. Her skills do apply a slow, but at the same time, it's hard to justify that over, say, something like Cliffheart if you're going to make the comparison, who does stun and can do true damage. So, and I mean, realistically, if you're going to be using Apollo, you're going to be yanking stuff into a hole, so you don't want to slow. And if you're using them as a delayer, as I mentioned, I use Cliffheart, you probably want to stun, not a slow. So, yeah, it's poor old Snow Saint gets nothing out of this deal. That said, Rope, simply because of her extra range on her skill 2, is the one you want to level. Because no other puller does that. Second to that, her talent, which increases her physical dodge by a fairly substantial amount. That can, and I don't want to really say this because there are certain better operators if you want to try and bait large physical nuke attacks. 12F. You can use her in that role as well. But it's not something I would probably consider. I would bring a different operator for that particular aspect. So, in this particular instance, the cheap old 4-star is the way to go, which is good. Next up are our pushes. Shore and a feeder, or I just call it feeder. Now you'll notice that I've actually got feeder again as the top pick. Sorry, Shore, I really tried to justify you, but I couldn't. And the simple fact of that is Shore skill 2 maxes out at force 2. All the other pushes max out at force 3. So the big issue with that is that Shore is very limited in what she can shove around. Well, she's not very limited, but she has her limits when not in conjunction with somebody like Angelina. Her talent has a flat boost to resistance, which is nice because that makes her more resistant to arts damage as opposed to any of the others. But, the situation where you're using a pusher to tank arts damage is probably very slim. That's it. F-Meter gets the top pick. The talent increases her physical dodge by quite a significant amount, which means you can put her in a lane if you want and not have to worry too much about her because she will dodge a lot. The skill 2 has much more range than Shore's. I think it's an extra 2 tiles on top of Shore's off the top of my head, and can hit force 3 at max mastery 3. Which makes F-Eater, unfortunately, substantially better than Shore no matter what you're up against. The other part of it is that both of her skills slow targets when hit, whereas Shore is just damage. And that is actually the trade-off. So F-Eater does less damage, but she has a slow. Shore does more damage, but has nothing. It's just damage. So essentially, if you... Actually, I think F-Eater is a store. Is store-bought. So F-Eater, yeah, nice and simple for you guys. You can grab it from the store, and well, yeah, I guess that makes her straight up the top pick. Sorry, Shore. No best alternative for you. Scrub. Moving on, we have our AoE snipers. Shiryuki gets the best alternative, but unfortunately these AoE snipers again fall into that bizarre category. I thought Yep, Sessa, rip. Shiryuki is an arts dealer. Her skill 2 changes the damage type to arts and slows. So really putting Shiryuki next to Meteorite and Sessa is not something I should be doing, but it's much of a muchness, really. Her talent reduces her attack speed and boosts her attack, so that can cause problems. Very rarely, but it can. And her skill 1 increases her range, which is incredibly useless because it's just a range increase. It doesn't add any attack, it doesn't change her attack speed, it doesn't modify anything except a range. So, it's hard to really justify an operator that has one skill and that's it. Even though, when you talk about, say, arts dealers, their skill 1 is usually just a flat attack bonus or a flat attack speed bonus, but Shiryuki doesn't even get a bonus, it's just a range boost, which is... it's not something you really want to work around, Meteorite gets the top pick. Her skills are incredibly reliable, especially her skill 1. Even against stuff that has high defense, her skill 1 tends to do a hell of a lot of damage. In an AoE scenario, which is how I've actually ranked these, even against high physical damage defense enemies, Meteorite's skill 1 will still probably do a better job of getting them down than Shiryuki. So Shiryuki is more if you have a very controlled operator enemy release, whereas Meteorite is if they just clump. Her skill 2 has a defense reduction, so can be used for tanky enemies or tanky bosses. And her talent can boost the damage of both skills and auto attacks. So that's semi-unique in that it can boost her skills. Not a lot of operators do that. It's usually just quote-unquote next attack, or it boosts the damage of an attack, which can actually make her skill 1 quite volatile if it goes off. Once again, it's one of those RNG things, so it's not something you should sort of hinge on when you're making a decision, but it's good to keep in mind. Sessa, on the other hand, his talent is fairly useless. His skill 2 can easily miss fast-moving enemies, and is really only good against slow-moving enemies or blocked enemies. And as I said, as I've got jotted down there, his skill 2 requires a fairly niche circumstance to be entirely useful because it slows their enemy attack, which is not wholly useful, really. I mean, if you've got a lot of enemies that are just pelting, like fast attacking enemies that are just pelting something, then yeah, I can see the usefulness of it. But outside of that, I mean, like, if something's in the middle of a lane not doing anything, then it's going to slow their attack speed. I mean, what's the benefit of that? His talent, just as a point of note, is that all currently blocked enemies take 16% physical damage. So that's 16% physical damage, which can be reduced by an enemy defense stat, and they have to be blocked. So, yes, as I said, his talent is fairly pointless because you don't, what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and wait until your tanks get backed up and then you're going to drop something in? I mean, that's, stupid. I don't know why. I don't know why they would have done that, but yeah. So Sess is not worth, especially as a 5-star operator. Maybe if he was a 4, I could see it, but as a 5-star operator, I'm sorry, Sessa, you get the "you showed up" medal. Thanks for bothering. Better luck next time. Moving on to our regular snipers. Now, for anybody who's watched my Arknights guides in the past, you will know that I absolutely adore Blue Poison. Blue Poison is without a doubt, in my opinion, the most versatile sniper, single target sniper in the game. She deals an Arts Dot as her talent. No 3 stars in this, Blue. This is the moving on stage from the 3 stars. So yeah, no 3s, no 6s. Look, Cruz gets an honorable mention, alright. So Blue with skill 2 becomes a Forks AoE during the duration of the skill. Her attacks hit 3 separate targets. It hits for physical damage and it leaves an Arts Dot on the target. She has 2, I think. As I noted, both of her skills deal physical. Both of her skills and her auto attacks deal physical and arts damage. It leaves an arts damage over time. The big issue with Blue, however, is that she is a glass cannon. She does a lot of damage. She has a lot of versatility, but she is so squishy. Next up is Greythroat. Unfortunately, a skill 2 charges by her attacking stuff, so unless she's constantly attacking, that makes life very difficult. Thankfully, her skill 1 is just a timed recycle, so that's perfectly fine. They're not both attacks, so she does, you can deploy her with skill 1 and she'll work just fine. Her talent's unreliable because it's an RNG proc chance, much the same as Cruz's. But that said, with her skill 2, she has immense burst potential. And even because her skill 1 charges 3 times, if she's been idle for a little while, she'll just throw those 3 burst attacks, those 3 skill 1s at the first thing that comes into her area of attack. So, most things that do that will have a bit of a headache. I do like Greythroat, but I find that she's very vanilla. So it's... Unless you're up against something very vanilla, Greythroat's probably not a great option. Jessica is in next. Depression Cat is up and we get her for free. Jessica has great survivability despite her low health by comparison. Her skill 2 adds a dodge chance, and it also increases her attack at the same time. So you can activate that to sort of mitigate damage in dodgy situations. The downside is that if it's off cooldown, well, you're stitched. Her skill 1 is fairly standard for snipers. Attack 4 times and the 5th attack deals X more damage. The big issue with Jessica is she's outclassed by Cruz until she gets into the E2s. This is kind of the shortcoming on Jessica, because a lot of people will probably argue, well, what's the point of leveling Jessica if you could just use Cruz the whole way through? And I'm not going to argue that point at all whatsoever. I can't give you a good reason to level up Jessica over Cruz. And frankly, I probably wouldn't suggest it. Jessica is great for that one trick that I said, her survivability, but outside of that, she's not anything too much more special than Cruz. Unfortunately, Cruz does hit her limits, and that is when you'll need to find some replacements, but up until that point in time, you're probably better off just using Cruz. Vermeil is up next, and her talent is a skill point regen. So that allows her to cycle her skills fairly quickly. Her skill 2 allows her to hit 2 targets at the same time for a small attack buff, which is quite nice. It's not as great as Blue Poison, but it's better than nothing. The big problem is that Vermeil is fairly vanilla as well. She has no special attributes or anything else like that going for her, so when you get to quite tanky enemy operators, she doesn't have, say, the burst of Greythroat or anything else like that. Her attack bonuses are fairly lackluster, so she can't really do anything against high defense enemies other than sort of tickle them. She, not great there, but Other than that, if you're just using her against regular enemies, flyers, drones, etc., she does the job perfectly fine. She's a 4-star, she does the job well, can't complain. And as I said, her skills cycle fairly reasonably because of her skill point regen. Now, for the first time, I've actually got an honorable mention on Platinum. Platinum, as most of you will know, focuses around her skill 2. Her skill 2 takes just under a minute to charge up, and it permanently increases her range for the rest of the operation. Increases it by 1 lot of 3. So that's where Platinum really differs from the rest and why she gets a little honorable mention, because she has a little bit of a niche, which means she can attack beyond what our regular single target snipers can attack. But due to a talent and a lot of her different skill, like her skill 2, for example, she prefers the slower fights. She doesn't do well when she just gets clumped with enemies. That's because her talent actually increases the damage for the time between her attacks. So obviously if she's firing one after the other, she's not going to get much at all out of that. Whereas if she's just sort of attacking a steady group of enemies and she's got some time between them, then she can actually boost up her next attack, which is quite good. The talent also affects, because the skill 2 decreases her attack speed, so it does sort of play into that in the same way that, say, Manticore's skill 2 is impacted by her talent, if you're familiar with Manticore. But yeah, it's truthful that Platinum does prefer the slower fights. And frankly, you know, in faster fights with a lot of enemies, you're better off using people like Vermeil and Blue Poison, who can attack multiple targets at the same time. So she gets an honorable mention for having some extra distance, which I have used in contingency contracts. There are specific roles in contingency contracts for her, and I keep saying that I'm trying not to bring contingency contracts into this argument, but it's worth mentioning. Next in, we have the wonky batch of single target snipers. We'll start off with Meteor. Meteor is much like Glacis in that her niche is drones. And don't you say anything, Blue. No more touching my spelling. Meteor gets a bonus. Her talent increases a bonus against drones, so if she's attacking anything else, don't you? If she's attacking anything else, then she won't get that talent bonus. Both of her skills reduce enemy defense. One of them's just 5 shots, 6-1 reduces defense by a larger amount. And the second one is a 5, I think it hits 5 enemy targets and reduces it by a lesser group. So she can do some AoE, but it's not great. It's just 1 shot. Once again, as with most 4-stars, they're outclassed by Cruz until they get into the E2s. Cruz, yeah, the crazy rabbit. May is the next of the weird bunch. May is slower. She's a slow sniper. Both of her skills apply the slow. Skill 2 has a chance to stun, but her talent is just a flat statistic buff, which kind of raises up what looks to be a lackluster stat pool. But that said, outside of her slow, May doesn't really do anything too special, so, you know, arguing her against Cruz, for example, is pointless because Cruz does the job better. But May does have situations where the slow is helpful, where you may need physical damage to slow a target as opposed to using an actual slower, which is arts damage. So May does have it. May is one that I would consider leveling because she's the only one that does what she does. It's the same as Meteor, really. Meteor does great damage against drones, when she's attacking drones, she does far more damage than her stats would suggest at base value. Last on the weird bunch, we have April, who I absolutely adore. April is a fast redeploy sniper. You can get her redeployed down at max potential. E2 max potential, you can get her redeployed down to, I think it's 30 seconds. She's not a fast redeploy operator. But she's not a true fast redeploy, but she can do the job. And using skill 2, which boosts her attack, and camouflages her, properly camouflages, you can actually use her to drop in and deal huge amounts of damage. As Asamoah just said in chat, you can just throw her in and she will just eat casters alive. She will eat just about anything that's not physically resistant. The reason I've kind of put her on her own page and everything else is that her skill 1 is nothing particularly special. A couple of shots, extra damage. So, and the bottom line is that her talents actually emphasize the fast redeploy using skill 2. So, obviously, if you're just going to set and forget, like you would with most snipers, she's not going to play to her strengths. So, that's really where April shines, is drop her in, get her to do a job, yank her back out. Now, people argue that because she is a sniper, it becomes quite costly to keep redeploying her. Well, the side argument to that is that the damage she does certainly outweighs the cost of redeploying her over and over. And typically, you're not just going to be like, I'm going to redeploy her, yank her back out, 30 seconds later, immediately redeploy, let the skill run its course, pull her back out, immediately, you're not going to be using her like you would use a true fast redeploy operator. And so, I mean, I would argue that unless you're doing a contingency contract where your deployment points are coming in at a slower rate, you don't need to worry about it. By the time you're redeploying her, under normal circumstances, you've got those deployment points back. So the argument's stupid, and it's really just childish. Moving on, we get to the meat and veg of our story. Welcome to the Vanguards, our standardized Vanguards, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this first fellow's name. I don't know if it's Chav or Chive. Yeah, he's silent. I'm really not sure. I've never listened to him speak his name. He is exceptionally situational. He boosts robots. At max potential, at E2, he can help drones be useful. Do you want to take a 5-star operator to E2 under the sole basis of making drones stronger for the couple of maps you might use them on? The answer is no. Her skill 2 deals a large amount of damage, reduces resistance, and does gain more deployment points than his contemporaries. But that doesn't make his talent, which buffs him for each drone deployed. You've got 3 drones, one of them blows itself up anyway. And you're not going to rely on a drone in that capacity anyway. So, to say that I would recommend Chive under any situation, circumstance, no. Flatly, no. Courier's in the store. Courier is easily obtainable. Courier is extremely tanky for a Vanguard, especially when his skill 2 is active. Courier is fantastic and will take you all the way through and beyond. His only downside is that his damage is woeful. So he may, in many instances, need someone else to help support him. On slow deployment point maps, so in the contingency contracts, that can be an issue. And for that specific scenario, you obviously probably wouldn't use Courier. But that said, under normal, regular story mode circumstances, Courier is a fantastic Vanguard. And since he's in the store, I mean, you've really got no reason to not jump in and grab him. It's really hard to put anything bad on Courier, outside of obviously his pathetic damage. Scavenger, I actually note as the best alternative. Scavenger has high damage and not so great survivability. She does have okay survivability. I'm not ever going to take it away from her, but where she shines is kind of that during her skill 2 use, which increases her damage output, she can actually kill things a hell of a lot faster than they can kill her. So she's the yin and yang for Courier, I suppose. The downside of her is that her talent needs her to be deployed without anything next to her, so in the adjacent tiles, the 4 adjacent tiles, but that's typically pretty easy. Texas is in as well next. Her talent gives you 1 additional deployment point to start with, 2 at E2. I think it's E2 that gives her that extra deployment point. So gives you a little bit extra wiggle room, as I said, for contingency contracts where you may be a bit slow off the ball. A skill 2 deals arts damage and stuns everything in its range, which is fantastic. It does have a lot of uses, and I have used it quite significantly. I use her as just a generic stunner in some instances, just because her damage is quite good. The downside of Texas is she's surprisingly squishy for what she is. I would actually say she feels to me to be more squishy than Scavenger. So Zimmer is my honorable mention. Look, as a personally, Zimmer is my Vanguard of choice. Zimmer reduces the cost of all deployed Vanguards. Zimmer is great out of the box. She has fantastic base stats. And I mean, while she does have a skill 2, which is interesting, it increases the attack and defense of all deployed Vanguard operators, and anything that is killed by a Vanguard operator generates 1 additional skill point, deployment point, sorry. The reason I bring in Zimmer for an honorable mention, though, is simply because of how well she can be utilized. As I said, she reduces the cost of all other Vanguards. And so, especially if you're like using her in conjunction with Texas, Texas gets 2, Zimmer reduces everything by 1. So it's interesting. Food for thought. But Zimmer will actually just sit there and stand her ground. She doesn't do a lot of damage, but she will just sit there and nicely sit there. I've never really had a massive issue with Zimmer. Like, she doesn't do a lot of damage, but I can't sit there and look at her versus Courier's damage, for example, and, you know, she does more damage than Courier. But to be entirely honest with anybody, my personal opinion is that if you do get Zimmer, absolutely level her up. Because Zimmer is just one of those Vanguards that will take you through the whole thing. I'm not saying that Courier and Scavenger won't as 4 stars, but Zimmer just adds that little bit extra, you know? Zimmer is out of the headhunting pool. So, I'm not actually sure what her summon requirements are. Let me have a look for you guys. Her pull requirements are DP recovery support. So she's just out of the regular headhunting pool, so she's nothing special. That's just getting her, really, that's the problem. So next up we have the single block Vanguards. All these will give you back their deployment points when you return them, not when they die. when you return them. And they will also generate 1 deployment point for every enemy they kill. Granny is unique amongst the batch that she is more defense orientated. She can't work in an assisting role because her skill 1 increases her defense and her skill 2 reduces her attacking range to... Don't bully Reed, she's good. Her skill 2 reduces her attacking range to her own tile, which means things need to be on top of her. So Granny kinda has her own little niche role. Her talent increases her talent gives a dodge chance to all deployed vanguards, which is quite nice. But the bottom line is that Granny works in a purely supportive / defensive vanguard role, which is very rare. There's very few situations where I can suggest dropping Granny in, so yeah. She's also an event pool, so most people probably won't have her. For just as an example, I can only think of one situation where I can sit there and truthfully say Granny would be useful. Next in is Vigna. Vigna's a fantastic operator. She's my top pick because you can't go too wrong with her. Her talent is RNG based, but most of them are. But where she really shines is her skill 2, which is a shorter skill down than her skill 1. It reduces her attack speed, but greatly increases her attack. And she can smack even the hardiest enemies in the game with that skill. It's really actually shocking. I didn't realize just how much damage she can do until I was doing her paradox simulation. I knew she was good. I've used her before, but I think that just really emphasized how good she is. She has reliable stats, so you don't need to worry about her falling in defense or offense. But that's it. You just have to remember that they only block one target. Reed is the last, and I have her set as the best alternative. Her talent increases resistance, and most vanguards probably won't see too much that needs them to be resisting hearts damage. Both of her skills are fantastic. First one's an attack speed buff as well as an attack buff, and skill 2 is an attack buff which deals additional arts damage on top of her physical attack, so similar to blue poison. But it will also give you additional deployment points for every enemy that she skewers with her spear. Reed is fantastic. She is a great alternative to Vigna, but I don't truly believe that she sort of offers enough to justify leveling up a 5-star over a 4-star if you are A, a new player, or B, just flat free to play, because as I mentioned at the start, you'll be less inclined to do, heavy farming, buy certain packs, for example, that sort of stuff. So, while Reed is fantastic, and I do love Reed, and I personally use Reed over Vigna. When I'm in my own time, when I'm doing guides, I use Vigna. You're better off just doing Vigna. She's more cost efficient to level up, and she'll do just as good a job. The only difference is that she just won't generate as many deployment points as Reed, and against heavily armored enemies where Reed does a little bit of arts damage on top, Vigna doesn't. She just does flat physical. That said, you can't take it away from her. Vigna will do the job for you. So, next up we have our healing defenders. Gummy is the top pick. How many people am I going to upset by saying this? I'm just waiting for chat to blow up on me. Okay, so Gummy's talent is a percentage chance to bonk enemies with her frying pan, deal extra damage, and apply a stun. Which is fantastic because that means that she can disrupt heavy hitting enemies. Skill 2 is what I personally call a proactive heal, which means if it's ready to go and anything around her is damaged, she'll heal it. The downside of Gummy is that her skill 2 needs to be timed. It has a 10-second delay before activating, so if you are using your healing defender in that sort of capacity where you need them to be a pure healer, Gummy does not shine in that environment. She will stitch you up if you're not entirely prepared for it. Hung is the operator I want to love, but I can't. I truly do want to love Hung, but I can't. Both skills require him getting smacked by enemies to charge. Both skill 1 and skill 2. Which is where he comes undone. It's... I wanted to love Hung, but I can't. If his skills were regular like everything else, then I'd say Hung would be fantastic. But anyway, his talent applies his self buff to an ally immediately behind, which is increased healing. It's great because Hung attacks only on his own tiles, so you can just face him whichever way you like and, you know, just abuse that talent. He has the highest defense of any healing operator besides Saria once she's buffed with her own self buff. And his skill 2 is fantastic by comparison of both Gummy and Nerl because it increases attack and defense. But like I said, Hung needs to be getting hit for his skills to charge, and that's pointless. There's only a handful of enemies that actually attack at a rate that you can sort of sit there and go, oh, okay, this is a good option. I think there's like 2 enemies in the whole game that attack with that sort of attack speed, where a defender can benefit from it. And that's unfortunately where Hung comes apart. And since both of his skills operate in that manner, you can't give him anything. You can only give him the thanks for showing up award. Nerl is the best alternative. Nerl doesn't have the best stats. And as I've noted, she tends to fill more of a supporting role due to her stats and her talent. Her talent increases global healing by 10%. That's at E2. At E1, it just increases her personal healing. Her second skill, which is it just turns her into a healer. Activates instantly, so it doesn't have the 10-second delay like Gummy's. But my personal issue with Nerl is that she is a reactive healer. Well, what I call a reactive healer. Which means that she will not, and this is the same as Hung, she will not heal a target unless they drop below 50%. Now, if you've got a bunch of enemies hitting something, like let's just say you've got 3 blocked enemies, and one of them is a heavy hitter. Let's just say they chisel your tank down to, I don't know, anything just over 50, from 50 to 60% health, and then the big hitter just comes in and goes bang and drops your defender down to whatever. The odds of something dying in that situation before Nerl will heal is huge. And that is why I don't like Nerl. I have the same issue with Saria. Saria's skill 1. It's a personal preference thing. It can work out in both different ways. On the one hand, you know, it can be a nice top up, but on the other hand, it can play against you. So because Nerl fits into a more of a supportive role, just due to talents and skills, I've given her the alternative with Gummy as the top pick. Now, undeniably, Saria is the king of this hill, so I'm not going to Not going to say much about if you get Zarya, but the alternatives, the immediate alternatives, here they are. Regular defenders. Now, I had to split this group up into 2 lots because there are a lot of regular defenders, and I didn't really want to make the text so small that everybody's squinting to watch it. First up, we've got Bubble. I kind of like Bubble, I'll admit. Bubble's just a little... She's just a little nugget, alright? Talent reduces the attack of enemies that hit her, and her skill 2 reflects damage by a percentage of her defense. So it's not a percentage of enemy anything else, but it does reduce by their defense skill. So that's the downside of that. But other than that, it's fairly unmitigated, and her attack doesn't really make a difference. The massive issue with Bubble is that her skill uptime for both skill 1 and 2 is shite. There's no other way to put it, it is shite. If her skills were if her skill uptime was better, both of them took a much shorter time to cycle, I'd say that she'd be very, very good. However, at the moment, it's hard to really put her into that sort of position. So she kind of shines against fast-hitting enemies. Not that she needs them to hit for her skill to cycle, but the fast-hitting enemies in the game typically don't have great defense. Ergo, while the damage is being reflected, it won't mitigate much. They'll knock themselves out. Everyone's happy. Moving on, we have Korra. Korra is the one that everybody knows, everybody loves, and Korra is the top pick. Why is Korra the top pick? Because frankly, there's only one other operator that can compete with her in defensive prowess. And even then, that's literally just defensive skill. Her skill 2 increases a block count by 1. She stops attacking, but she gains a huge boost to her defense, and she heals herself for a little bit. So she makes life a little easier for your tank healers in the meantime. Korra will last you through to God only knows when. So far, she's still viable. In chapter 8 we're at. Her only downside is that her damage is a bit lacking, but especially given that during her skill 2 she stops attacking altogether, I mean, that's something you've got to kind of put in the bag as well. That aside, I believe Korra's in the store as well, so yeah, grab Korra, she won't do you wrong, take her to E2, you won't regret it. Matterhorn is the other one, I believe he's in the store as well. He's sort of unique. There are situations where Matterhorn is fantastic simply because of how his talents and skills boost him, which is primarily his hit points. Because his hit points are what's primarily affected, it does increase other skills, but the bulk of it revolves around his hit points. That means that he is the only tank that is truly effective against true damage. And that's simply because you're throwing health at something that has no mitigation. That is the only situation in which Matterhorn is particularly useful. He does have immense resistance potential, but again, it's kind of limited. So he's good against arts dealers, but there's only a handful of maps where you're getting a whole lot of arts only getting thrown at you, so that said, he's free, and also, let's be honest, there's only a handful of times where you get true damage, so Matterhorn, you're great at what you do, but what you do is not all that common. Sorry, buddy. Now, it's worth noting that as I skip onto the second page of the tanks, it doesn't change that Korra is still the top pick. Korra is by far still the top pick. It's just that these are now the 5 stars. So, Croissant is the next up. Talent gives a chance to resist physical and arts damage to Croissant and the 4 adjacent tiles. So, top, bottom, left, right. It's a reduced chance for the adjacent tiles, but nevertheless, it's there. The skill 1 boosts her talent for the duration that it is active. It cycles on its own, you can't control it. Skill 2 makes her a forks pusher. She pushes just as well as any other pushers. The problem is that she doesn't push in a direction, she just pushes. So if something is kind of on a side tile, she'll yeet that off in a direction and good luck to you. That can be horrible. That can be absolutely horrible, so that can work around you. Can work against you, sorry. That said, it also stuns when she knocks it back, does a fair bit of damage. It's quite nice. She has her place, I'm not going to deny it. Her skill 1 is fantastic. I mean, who doesn't love a chance to absolutely resist something? Would I level her? Personally, yes, I am leveling her, but that's not taking into consideration if you're a newer player. If you're a newer player, would I level her? No. The answer is outright no. I would focus on someone else, like Korra. Bison's the only one that can actually compete with Korra in terms of pure defense stat. Bison is nothing short of a physical wall. As far as physical defense goes, Bison is unequaled. But the downside of him is that's all he is. He is a physical wall. The talent does buff the enemy behind. The ally behind. That is a defense buff, which can play into strengths if you're using those guards that sort of support from behind. I didn't touch base on any of them. There's 3 in total, I believe, maybe 2. So I'm talking like Swire, for example. I believe Swire's in the pool. So in that sort of concept, it's quite good. And the skill 2 just furthers that. Skill 1's just a basic defense buff. Skill 2 further increases that wall that he is. Would I level Bison? Probably not. As a new player, I believe Bison isn't even in the pool. I think he's still I may be wrong. I'm not sure. I've never seen him. But would I level him? Probably not, because he's just a wall. That's it. He doesn't really. He's a one-trick pony. Liscam is in next. Liscam is my personal tank of choice. I didn't give her an honorable mention because her talents can be a bit, or her skills rather, can be a bit finicky. Her talent gives her resistance, which is beautiful. And restores skill points to adjacent allies, so top, bottom, left, right. You may have heard me comment in some of my videos about using a Liscam battery. That's where it comes from. Yeah, you could turn him around. So Liscam can boost skill points. There's one map, for example, where I've used, say, Liscam in conjunction with Chen. Just to cycle Chen's skills exceptionally fast. So that's one of the little niches of using Liscam. Skills require Liscam to be getting hit, so they can be incredibly unreliable. Skill 2 does stun her, which means that she won't be blocking stuff while she's on the ground. It's a short stun by comparison to some of the others I've mentioned, but it is still a stun and is not great for a tank. Skill 1 is an automatic activation, so you have no control over it. So it's not particularly ideal. But that said, Liscam is unique in that she has a ranged attack and she can hit drones. so she can hit aerial units. As I said, Liskarm is my personal tank of choice. I've used Liskarm since God only knows when, and she has very rarely done me wrong. Would I level Liskarm if I were a newer player? Honestly, yeah, I would. In my opinion, for all the time I've been using her, Liskarm has always done me really, really well. So I can't ever say that Liskarm is not a good operator. Other people may disagree, other people may turn around and say, well, because you can't control her skills, you know, it makes her less effective than other defenders. Liskarm has a great set of skills. She's one of the very few standard tanks that has resistance. And I think she just has a perfect set of skills. It's a perfect set of stats. The stats just make her a really solid operator. She does nothing fantastic, but she does everything quite well. So I suppose we could give... And no. So I suppose we could give Liskarm, say, the honourable mention of the day. Moving on, we have our arts defenders. Durnar is the best alternative for lack of anything else. Durnar has a flat stat boost as her talent, and her skill 2, which is why you would bring her in the first place, requires her to be getting hit to make it any good. I have taken Durnar into maps with skill 2, wanting to use skill 2 for that map, and Durnar has never been able to activate the skill. Skill 1 cycles as normal, but it's just an attack, whereas her skill 2 is an AoE. The AoE is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but getting it to activate is woefully difficult. It's worth noting that neither of these tanks have particularly great defense, but they deal arts damage, so they're unique in that sense. But yeah, Durnar is great if you've got nothing else. The nothing else tends to be Asbestos, who gets the top pick. She gets so much resistance. It's lovely to actually look at her resistance stats by comparison to any other tank, and she also gains skill points when she gets hit by arts. Skill 1 dodges one whole arts attack, so you could say an arts nuke, for example, and she then takes reduced arts damage for the next however long it lasts for. Skill 2 increases her range to that of a shotgun sniper, so 2x3, 2 forward, 3 across, and turns her attack into an AoE, so, which is interestingly unique for a defender, but nevertheless, it's quite good. And her skills have a really good uptime as well. So I wouldn't even bother with Durnar, to be frank. Just wait until you get Asbestos and go forward from there. Poor old Durnar got the short stick. Last but not least, look, I haven't covered every single archetype. For example, I haven't covered AoE healers, simply because the AoE healers all do something different. Ergo, you're going to want different AoE healers for different situations. There's no one trick fits all. Most people just generically say that Telopsis is the best AoE healer, just because of her map-wide skill point boost, so that's food for thought if you guys want to look at it that way. You could argue that Perfumer with her map-wide heal is fantastic. I mean, it's really about what you want them to do. So I can't simply point out a singular AoE healer and say, you want this one, because it doesn't work that way. That said, of the groups that I haven't touched base on, these are the ones that you're going to want to level for the reasons I'll tell you. Acid Drop is a short-range sniper. Her alternatives are Schwarz and Province. And the bottom line is that Acid Drop is always going to deal a percentage of damage due to a talent. Her skills have pretty crappy uptime, but in essence, it's simpler to level her and cheaper to level her than it is to do Province. Understandably, if you get Schwarz the 6-star, well, good on ya. But by comparison to the 4 to 5 stars, there's not a lot of point in dealing with Province, unfortunately. The same goes for Pinecone with her alternatives, which is Aosta and Executioner. She's more of a contemporary for Aosta than Executioner. But the bottom line is, once again, Pinecone will do the job of Aosta and or Executioner just as well. Not better, but just as well as the other two. Of the long-range snipers, Firewatch is the most versatile. The other ones have some little bits and pieces to them, but Firewatch is by far the most reliable of the three. So the long-range snipers, in case you're wondering, are Andriana, Amariyah, and Firewatch. So 2 5-stars and 1 4-star. And while, once again, Andriana and Amariyah have their little niche things, Firewatch is the one you're going to get the most bang out of your buck for. Of the summoners, Scene, to me, in my opinion, is the best of the group. Obviously excluding the 6 stars. But even then, Magellan deploys flying drones, so you can't really group her up with the summoners. Scene's little robots will actually detect invisible units. They will be invisible themselves until something attacks, like gets into their range and attacks them. And I found that these little drones tend to be quite tanky, actually, so they're quite good. That said, if you cannot get Scene, because I think she is event locked, Deep Color is your next best. Because Deep Color is the straight down of that. Maya is probably not great because she fills a completely different role than both Scene and Deep Color with her deployables. And as I said, Magellan, the 6-star, well, her drones fly, so they can't block anything, which means that she is in a completely different category to the regular summoners. Last but not least, we have the ranged guards, or ranged guard, singular. Ranged guards kind of fall into the same category as most other things in that, or the AoE healers, I should say, in that different ones are there for different roles. The one ranged guard that's going to do you the most good out of all of them, short of the 6 stars, is Lapland. She can do arts damage and she can do physical damage. Most are just locked into whatever they do. So it gives Lapland a lot more wiggle room for if you need arts damage and you're low on range tiles, you can use Lapland. Her arts skill actually attacks 2 different targets, so there's that going for you. And the skill 1, which is her physical option, actually has it's an infinite duration skill, and it gives her a chance to avoid damage. So as far as picking one ranged guard to go with, try and get yourself Lapland, because she will not go wrong and you'll probably use her for quite a while. Even by comparison of using, say, Silver Ash or Thorns, Lapland is in some situations better. Most people use, say, Silver Ash for skill 3, which has an obnoxious recycle. His skill 3 is there for one reason and one reason only, and that's to just wipe out everything in a big area. So, and a lot of the time, as I said, or as I have said, that some of the 6 stars you bring in to do a singular job. If they're not there to do that singular job, you may as well just bring something else that will do the job just as well. So like, just using it as an example of Silver Ash versus Lapland, if you're not using Silver Ash's skill 3 for a particular reason, then there's no reason not to bring Lapland over Silver Ash. Most people will sit there and they'll argue the point. They'll go, oh, well, Silver Ash has higher stats and all the rest of it. You know what? You're right. That's not wrong, but yeah. At that point, if you're not using them for their specific strengths or specific skills, it's apples and oranges. It really is. I mean, what? Lapland might take 1 extra hit to kill something over Silver Ash. How many times is that 1 extra hit genuinely going to stitch you up constantly? Like every time you rerun something, it's that 1 hit that does you over. The odds are never. Or, it's that 99.9% chance or whatever that they stick on the bottles. So, Lapland is the one that will go quite well for you. I use Lapland a hell of a lot. Many of the other ranged guards do have niches. Frostleaf, for example, has a slow, which is useful in some situations. Midnight does extra damage, which is useful in some situations. Arene does extra drone damage, which is obviously only good against drones. It's, you've got all these different ranged operators and they all do different things. So Lapland is the one that's going to work for you in nearly every situation. That aside, guys, that is the end of all of that. So if you guys have any questions, concerns, thoughts, sharp objects, by all means, throw them at me and I'll do my best to answer them. Because, yeah, I mean, I'm sure people have some... I haven't covered everything, so it wouldn't surprise me if people do have questions about certain operators, or if you've come in late, I'm happy to go back and recap some stuff if people are interested. It's worth noting, if you did come in partway through it, that I didn't touch base on the 3s or the 6s. Simply because I'm doing this for newer players, so you're not going to have a swath of 6-star operators that you can go to. You may be lucky to have a single 6-star operator if you're fairly new. Especially if you're new and free to play, the odds of you having a 6-star is highly unlikely. And obviously I didn't touch the 3 stars because if you're a new player, you'll be using the 3 stars already, so there's no point in me telling you to use a 3-star that you're already using. Cruce is really the only one that I can tell you will go for great deals of time. I mean, Beagle does a great job. Asa, just as a point of note, this will all be archived on my YouTube channel, so you don't need to worry too much if you did miss a lot. I shall grab you a link to my YouTube channel, just in case you did want to watch the beginning. So there's my YouTube channel, because it is somewhere on my Twitch, but I'll be damned if I know, because I can never find it myself. I just know it's there, because I put the link in. In many cases, though, the 6 stars are superior to just about anything. Like, the only real deviation is operators that just have so much standing power, like Cora will stand side by side with any 6-star you can think of. The only difference typically is that the 6 stars have more utility to them. And that's, like, very rarely is it just a flat upgrade from a 4 or 5 to a 6. Usually the 6 just brings a whole bunch more to the table. And so that's why I haven't touched 6 stars. Like, Just trying to think of who I can go to. I haven't touched the DP printers, I'm sorry. That's because both of them are just as good as each other, so... I know, can you imagine that? Holy hell. That would be crazy. So yeah, Elysium and Myrtle. I'll touch base on those actually, seeing as how you've messed it. Seeing as how you've brought it up. I don't know where messed it come from. So look, Myrtle is in most instances the best option. There are instances where Elysium, who does buff snipers, comes in handy. But generally speaking, Myrtle is who you want to get and go for. Myrtle's the one you want to take up. I didn't even think about those, to be entirely honest with you, but yes. Just grab Myrtle. Myrtle buffs, or Myrtle self-heals and heals every deployed Vanguard. Myrtle's amazing. But there are situations where you do need early snipers, and Elysium also brings that into account. I mean, both do the same job. I'm not going to tell you that one's any better than the other. It's again one of those situational things. Myrtle is cheaper. Not substantially. It's only one deployment point, but yeah. Even their stats are relatively similar. Elysium being a 5-star is a little bit tankier, but both have crappy attack. It's the faster startup again. This is something I'm going to go back to. The faster startup is especially true if you're using people like Texas or Zimmer, who will modify your deployment points or the deployment point costs. So again, especially useful for those contingency contracts where they steal your deployment points. Rude little things they are. Another thing I'd like to touch base on too is Otage, who I very rarely haven't touched base on. Otage and Helga are deployment guards. They're single target guards. They can't be healed, but they heal themselves. They have just a little heal over time, and I believe they leech. Well, they don't leech. They gain health each time they attack. Otage, the 4-star, is fantastic, and if you do get a hold of her, absolutely level her up. She is an amazing operator, and I didn't think I would use her as much as I do. I'm not touching base on the dual strike guards because the dual strike guards are all over the shop. And obviously the regular duelist guards I didn't touch. Most people will honestly use Melantha all day. Matoimaru I use personally because Matoimaru is just all health, so she doesn't care what damage is getting thrown at her. Franca has a chance, which I hate, a chance to ignore defense. It's, you know, it's that RNG shit. I don't like it. Yeah, see, Cutter's all over the place. Cutter's really weird. She has drone damage. The big issue with Cutter, and, you know, I actually lost subscribers over this. Yes, I have lost subscribers over this opinion. She does it really well. I've actually put her in a position, for one of the contingency contracts, I had her in a position where she was blocking a lane, because I only needed her to block the lane, but I had her skill 2 selected just to kill drones as they flew over, and it does a lot of damage against those drones. But look, a lot of people sit here. I have not been using Robin. I haven't leveled Robin yet. I haven't had the opportunity. The big issue that I have with Cutter is that Cutter needs to be attacking to get her skills up. And people sit there and this is what I lost subs over, fair income. They go, oh, well, Cutter can theoretically do more damage than Chen. There's that word, theoretically. Chen, while she does need to attack things to get skill points, she has a talent that gives her skill points. Cutter does not. Cutter absolutely needs to be attacking things to be any good. What is the point of arguing Chen versus Cutter on a theoretical pretense? You can't do that. Exactly. Look, I'm happy to look at the stats. I'm happy to look at everything that's on the table, and I'm happy to sit there and go, okay, yes, absolutely, Cutter can do more damage than Chen. Show me it on a map. I guarantee it's not going to happen. Chen's skills do what? Triple the damage of Cutter's? Chen can restore her own skill points, so during downtime, she's not literally down. Don't get me wrong, Cutter's a fantastic operator, but I don't touch base on her because I don't believe that Cutter brings any more to the table for a newer player. Than the regular guard. So Maru, Melantha, I don't think that Cutter brings any more to the table than those operators. They restore their skill points on their own. They cycle happily. You know, it's the downtime you've got to worry about, and the downtime is what does Cutter no good at all. I didn't touch base on Manticore and Ethan because they both play two different roles. Ethan is flat damage, Manticore is crowd control. Ethan can play the crowd control role, but it's RNG, so I'm not going to say that Ethan is crowd control. Even when he's using his skill, his crowd control talent is still not at 100%, so it's not crowd control, it's Fork's crowd control. To compare the two, honestly, grab Ethan. You guys that are new Doktahs, you're free to play, grab Ethan over Manticore, level Ethan over Manticore, simply because Ethan sort of kind of does what Manticore does, but does more damage, so. Manticore is fantastic for slowing and stunning. Ethan is far easier to get. Ethan's from the shop. So, yeah, that's the flat answer to that. Manticore, if you need something stunned, absolutely if you need something stunned, or absolutely if you need something slowed, Manticore is far superior. If you just need damage, and you just need one of those operators on there, guess what? Ethan's going to be better. Because Ethan has a chance to bind. Please note that it's a bind, not a stun. He does flat arts damage and leaves the damage over time. So, even after something walks out of Ethan's attack range, the damage is still ticking away. As for what they're called, they are called... they're called controllers, apparently. Controller specialists. That said, Manticore does do good damage when she's E2 max potential. It's just the bottom line is that typically Ethan gets more hits than Manticore does. The one big difference, though, I think, between the two of them is that Manticore has a true invisibility, whereas Ethan doesn't. Ethan is just less likely to get hit versus Manticore's true camouflage. So that's something that you really want to take into consideration, but yeah, Ethan is the better of the two options for newer / free-to-play players. Thermite, I'm actually going to throw out there, do all your robots up. Look, a lot of people that I've spoken to, a surprising number of people, I'm actually going to throw this out there, I'm going to throw you all under the bus. A surprising number of people I've spoken to about Arknights strategy haven't leveled their 2 and 1 stars, so the robots and the basic 2-star operators. Those basic 2-star operators tend to have exceptionally specialized talents, which make them incredibly useful in most situations, or the situations in which that talent is designated. So, as I mentioned before, when I touch base on Rope's physical avoidance, it's 40%. Well, 12F has even higher than that. So if you're using them to avoid a nuke, for example, a la Patriot, you'd use 12F. I think Durin is the one that has exceptionally high arts avoidance. So again, for arts nukes, the little Durin. The robots are great because you can deploy them outside, beyond your deployment limits. Thermite EX is outstanding. I don't care what anybody says. I use Thermite heaps. So yeah, you level those lower star operators, guys. Get all your 1s, 2s, and 3s. Level them all the way to their maximum. It is stupidly difficult. I finally got there. I don't know how long it's taken me. It's taken me way too long to get them all maxed out. I just read your I just read your name, Blessed Astolfo Pillow. That's scary. In what way, Blessed? No, don't answer that, please. I'm worried about that answer. So that ends my little chat on all of this. Don't look at me like that. Yeah, it took me forever. I actually got the thermite pots really, really easy. Castle was a bit of a fight, but Lancet, oh my god. I was fighting with Lancet for so long. The other thing is that you guys will probably note before I say that's all, folks, is that I didn't actually put the latest events operators in. Simply put, I haven't had the time to use them personally, so I can't give you a personal opinion. I've read what they do, but again, that comes back to the discussion that myself and the Astolfo Pillow were having, is that just because you read something on paper, it doesn't mean it works well in an operation. The theory nearly always looks good. Does it work well in practice? Any 5-star and below op in the future I am looking forward to. There probably might be. Well, actually, let's have a look if I'm looking forward to... I'm looking forward to a 6-star, I can tell you that. Well, I'm looking forward to 2 6-stars, actually, but I don't think so. No, not a below. Calcid is one of them, but that's not actually... That wasn't when I first said I am looking forward to one. That's not actually who I was looking at. I'm kind of looking forward to Kirara. But no, the one operator, the 6-star that I'm actually looking forward to is Carnelian. I freaking adore the lower contemporaries of her. So that's Mint and... Who's the other one? Mint and... I'm never going to find it now. Yeah, beeswax. Thank you. I adore those operators. I really do. I've used them so much. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to Carnelian. Actually, I think I just saw one. Yeah. Totafonts. Totafonts is a 5-star. There you go. I'm looking forward to her because I can't justify leveling a 6-star version of her. I look at that and I'm like, well, you can use her for the Patriot fight, but that's about it. So yeah, I don't want to level a 6-star for that sole purpose. That's just silly. So I am actually very much looking forward to a 5-star one of that. There you go. 5-star. Huzzah. They're actually... Oh, no, wait, the 5-star. I know. Lava. The lava 5-star. I'm stoked. I hope they do that for all the 3-stars. That'd be fantastic. I would adore them to level up all the 3-stars. Mint's the same, it's just no self-defense. It's more of a supporter. She just plays a supporting role. Yeah, I know, right? Imagine a Cruise 5-star. Oh my god. You'd never use another sniper again. Sorry, Exusia. You just yeet Exusia out the window. Thank you. My rabbit here's here. I mean, even Beagle. Like, I use Beagle forever. So just thinking of like a 5-star Beagle is like amazing. Yeah, I genuinely hope they push that on all of the 3-stars. I do. If they do that, I will be so happy. Even if like Cruz is inferior to say Exusia, even though she shouldn't be, but let's just say she is. I think that'd be fucking fantastic. And the requirement, from what I'm led to believe, to upgrade Lava is just having finished chapter 110, 1-10. So that means that it's great for new players. Yeah, well, Beagle's not looking forward to any promotion. She keeps failing her tests. So those 3 to 5-star upgrades are actually really good for like new players because they're really available. 110, chapter 110. I mean, come on. So yeah, it's something I look forward to hopefully seeing, but at the same time, I'm kind of not holding my breath. I think it may be a little bit too much to ask for, but who knows? Because, you know, Lava, quote-unquote, the Purgatory, actually had, even though it was a bullshit story, it was a story, you know, it was some rubbish screenplay that she wrote with Nian. So, you know, you've really got to wonder whether or not that can expand to everybody else or not. And I mean, like, I was just scrolling through a list of operators, and another one that catches my eye here, as far as the newer healing operators goes, Tui. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, and I don't think she introduces herself either. So I can't just sort of copy what she says. Her claim to fame is that she can keep Surta up alive for longer in her skill 3. I mean, everybody sits there and says, oh, she's an amazing healer because she can do that. Cool, guys. You're going to bring this specific healer and this specific setup for this specific operator. Yeah, she's in game right now. I was scrolling down the list of operators, and she's the one that just caught my eye as one that I've heard people talking about. So I'm expressing my unpopular opinion. It's silly in my opinion to rely that heavily on a 6-star is obnoxious. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. There is going to come a time in this game where there's going to come a time in this game where you can't just flog the horse to death with 6 stars. You're going to need some kind of strategy. You know, you're not just going to be able to drop in Surta with skill 3 and she'll fix all your damn problems. I'm not going to say that they won't fix most of your problems, but relying so heavily on that, I mean, my brain isn't wired to think that way. That's another unpopular opinion, is just strong-arming your way through content. Because, you know, I've done contingency contracts where I've thrown my best 6 stars at it, and because there's no rhyme or reason to it, I've just thrown in my best 6 stars. It's all come apart. So it's kind of why I emphasize when I make guides and when I do these sort of support videos and tips videos or advice videos, whatever you wish to call them, you shouldn't hinge everything on a 6-star. Doesn't matter who the 6-star is. I mean, what, you're going to throw Surta against something that's got stupidly high resistance and drop in not sure, and drop her in and hope for the best? Like, that's what you're going to do? I mean, come on, guys. It's ridiculous to consider that sort of strategy. And I mean, like I said, I've had people argue that point against me, and I'd like to see them. Oh God, that was crazy, that event. But I liked it. I loved that event. I want that event again. I don't care if it's that one specifically, but, you know, I'd like another one like it. But yeah, especially in events like that where you can't bring your own 6 stars to sort out a game. Like, what are you going to do then when you actually have to think for yourself? And not just throw a 6-star at it and hope for the best. Like, that's the ridiculousness of the situation. Scene was so fantastic, and that's why I've got Scene just here as our summoner. Scene was beautiful in that event. You know, I reckon you'd get a lot of hate for saying that. I remember watching a couple of guides actually on the topic of Surta, and a lot of like, it was for one of the contracts, and they were using Surta to knock out enemies, right? Dropping drop insert her, she kills an enemy, pull her back out, rinse, repeat. I'm not going to lie to anybody. I threw in my Helliger and he did a significantly better job. Like, why would you use Surta? Like, I ended up just using... yeah, Helliger and Skadi. And they just did Skadi skill 2 and Helliger skill 2, and they just did such a better job so much quicker. Surta is severely overrated. The only reason people like her is for the same reason people like Spectre. She has an invulnerability skill, which means that she can't just get wiped out. Which, in my opinion, is the biggest crutch you can give somebody in this game. And that's not the unpopular opinion, that is the throw tomatoes at me opinion. Actually, I've just noticed another one on the side of my other screen. One that I was really waiting for was Iris. I was stoked for Iris. I haven't leveled her up yet, but yes. I am looking forward to testing her. I actually remember somebody telling me to use Spectre against Patriot. They're like, oh, just use Spectre or Patriot will die. I'm like, Patriot will die? Are you serious? Do you really think that Spectre's got the damage to wipe out Patriot? Are you serious? Maybe if I, buff the ever-living hell out of Spectre, we're talking throw in Ack, every debuffer I can throw at Patriot, we'll put a mine under him. Maybe we'll get there in the end. As soon as that invulnerability comes off Spectre, Spectre's getting wiped. Because Patriot just smacks anything that he walks up to. He doesn't care what it is. But like I said, at the moment we're stuck at a limit. I know there's rumors going around that Elite 3 is coming around. On the Chinese server at least. There's rumors of that. Somebody data mined an Elite 3 thing. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, because it was on Reddit and I don't trust anything Reddit says. Reddit is like the local newspaper. 90% bullshit. But at the moment, we have a level cap for all of our operators, E2, 90, 80, 70. So there's going to come a time, and seeing as how we're following in line with the Chinese server, let's say we go up to chapter 9 or chapter 10. Your glorious E290 6-star is probably not going to be as glorious in chapter 10 or chapter 9 as it is now. Every chapter that comes out, that E290 that you've got and you think is the best thing since sliced bread, it's just going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. So if you think constantly hinging on a 6-star to do a job for you, like Surta, is going to get you through the game, you're probably going to be in for a fairly rude shock at some point. It may not come in chapter 9, but it'll come. Yeah, the E3 icon was data mined, but I don't... Yeah, like I said, it showed up on Reddit, and I don't trust Reddit. Half of the people on Reddit wouldn't know their arsehole from their elbow, frankly, but that's another story. Reddit's like that place where all the people who think they're experts go. The know-alls that know fuck all, as I would say. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some people on Reddit that actually do have a clue, and they're usually quite bright people. But the general population, the general population of Reddit individuals that lurk about in the Arknights slash, Azur Lane or whatever, take your pick. They wouldn't know what they're talking about if, you gave them the math. But yeah, like you say, Asa, they're doing stuff at the moment to stitch up people who rely on that one operator that they've relied on for everything. Like, if you're a new player, you'll sit there and you'll deploy Surtur, and Surtur will kill Frostnova, and Surtur will kill... Probably won't kill Patriot, but it'll do a lot of damage to Patriot. But, they're getting... to the credit, I wasn't expecting them to do it. I'd hoped they would do it, but I wasn't expecting them to. They are doing their best to stitch up people that turn to using individual operators in that manner. And, good on them. Genuinely good on them. Because, as I said, there's guide videos on my YouTube channel, and I spend hours sometimes doing those fucking guide videos with, trying to use low star operators for people who are, newer or free to play or whatever the situation is. There's plenty of people who do the same, don't get me wrong, I'm not unique or special, but we all probably spend hours doing it to help people out that have those low star units, and then somebody's just like, oh yeah, content, throw Surtur. Yeah, I can do that too with my full row of 6 stars, but what's the fucking point, What do I get out of this? What does anybody get out of it, It's actually, I know a good one, right? It's like those YouTube videos, right, that you see, the guide videos, and you're like, map, whatever, with 5 operators, and you're like, oh, 5 operators, that's a really hard map. I'm really keen to see how this guy does this. 6 fucking E290s. Like, that's fucking great, mate. I'm really happy that you've just flexed on that map. They're all Mastery 3, they're all max level, they're all max potential, and you're just like, and you're proud of this? Like, that's nothing to be proud of. You don't post that shit on YouTube and then bloody have a pull over your greatness. That's not how this shit works. Some of the CCs were really, really hellish. I mean, I admit I didn't upload a guide for this one because by the time I actually got around to doing it, I was super slow on this one for the 18. I ended up going and checking out what somebody else was doing, I'll admit, and the way they did it, I looked at it and I've just gone, you know what, I would have never thought of that in a million years. Like, it was so stupidly easy, and I've just looked at myself, I'm like, I've been slaving away at this for 12 hours, and this guy's just doing it like this, and that's so easy, oh my god. So I just had a moment of absolute defeat, and I'm like, you know what, absolutely have that one. I'm not even gonna try. But I mean, it is why it's another reason why I started doing guide videos. Like I said, there's plenty of people who do them. We all struggle through them, but a lot of the time, the way I do it is different to the way somebody else does it. The way they do it's different to the way somebody else does it. Yeah, the beta for contingency contracts was just not okay. Yeah, it wasn't... I understand where they were going with it, but... yeah, it wasn't fun. But yeah, the reason I upload guide videos, even if they're, you know, silly or stupid, or is simply because, you know, some people might not have the same operators that somebody else does. You know, I think it's good to have that. You're always praying for that RNG. What are you talking about? Doesn't matter who you use. I remember when I was doing one of my guide videos, I was using Moose, that 23% chance to hit twice, for example, and she was going through trash, and as the trash mobs are coming through, she's just using that skill every single time, and then when the actual heavy unit comes in, she doesn't use it at all. I'm like, are you serious? You have one job, Moose. One fucking job, please. You're ruining my whole life. So yeah, it's I have a lot of unpopular opinions on this channel, though, to be entirely fair. I know, right? Yeah. The golems in the recent CC were just garbage. Ended up throwing absolutely everything at those golems and they just weren't dying. I tried everything. I'm genuinely serious when I say I was at it for 12 hours. I tried everything. I tried debuffing, I tried buffing, I threw everything at it. I threw Nyan in there, I threw fucking Nyan and Hoshiguma in there just for the, you know, to maximize the buff. I had it close at one point, and looking back on it, I realized that I probably, you know, after I'd actually just given up all hope and left it for a couple of days, it came to me how I could have done it. I never bothered trying because at this point I'd already had the R18, but then I sat there feeling like an idiot. That's alright. Contingency contracts always confuse me. I'll never get used to them. I'll always keep making mistakes with them. That's why I keep trying to call them by their actual names, but it doesn't, especially like this one. This one's got a weird name. Yeah, except for this one. This one's got dodgy music. It's not even Arknights music. I don't know where they grabbed the music in this one from. But yeah, usually they have really nice music, so... I think Blaze had probably the best soundtrack, if I'm recalling it right. Blaze or Pyrite, one or the other. Sorry, not Blaze, Cinder. That aside, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I will be calling the stream ad this, much as it is fun to chat with everybody, because I do enjoy Arknights chatting. Burn Me to the Ground was fantastic. Fantastic. So yeah, I will be calling the stream at this. As I said, if you did come in late, the stream will be archived on my YouTube channel, which I just posted to the chat. So you can catch up with that. I'll add some timestamps as soon as I can. And I hope this helped you guys. I mean, as I say, I have a lot of unpopular opinions. It seems to be my whole experience when I talk about Arknights, especially, as I said, I've lost followers over my Arknights opinions. And yeah, by all means, follow me. I don't really do a lot of Arknights streams per se. I'm still a little shocked that somebody was so upset that they unfollowed me just over my cutter opinion. And it was actually another beginner stream, right? It was another. I was going over all the 4-stars, and I touched base on cutter, and I said, "Look, if you're a new player, you probably won't want to bother with cutter because at this point in the game, you're probably just better off using Melantha, right?" And they're like, "Oh my god, cutter can do more damage than Chen." I'm like, well, yes, but no. And apparently that upset them. Apparently they took that personally. So, yeah. I mean, I entirely get it. Like, Arknights is one of those games where different operators, the same operators can be used in different capacities. People are going to have different opinions. Like, in that self-same stream, I had a couple of guys who had different opinions than myself about healing defenders, and that's entirely okay. I don't care. You can have a different opinion to me. That's what Arknights variety is all about. That differing opinion. You have your way, I have my way. Person 3 has their way, But, you can't just sit there and go, "Oh, this person is good, full stop." No, that's not how that works, especially when what you're saying isn't true to start with. It may look good on the paper, but I can tell you it doesn't work that way in real life, or in an operation. That said, guys, if you haven't already, please follow me. I've linked my YouTube channel where I archive all my videos. I upload my contingency contract videos there. So like and subscribe those if they help you out. Leave comments, ask questions if you like. I will get around to answering them when I see them. I really don't mind if you need help or you have an opinion or you have a question. I really don't mind answering. And yeah, well, thanks for showing up, guys. I'm sorry I don't really have a lot of Arknights videos. I don't typically do any more than guide videos on stream. I don't mind doing these little advice videos. No doubt when we get some more operators, I will once again do another advice video. I may even do a 6-star advice video, but I feel like that's maybe be a bit touchy. Basically because I think if a new player gets a 6-star, they're going to think that 6-star is the best thing ever. And I don't really want to turn around and say, well, that 6-star's all right, but this 5-star does just as good a job. I don't really want to do that. Look, the base is another one of those questionable things, because there's a couple of different ways you can set your base up, and it's really down to what you like. So that's another one of those funny things. I mean, maybe I'll just do a brief guide on how to do bases and stuff like that. The options, for example. So that's a good idea. I might touch base on that. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. This guy's got his lighter out and his petrol can ready. Oh, I can't save anybody from some of the operators. I can't save myself from Ack. I'm convinced this game should be called Arknights. My Ack is potential 6, so like, Jesus Christ. And I am actually melting Acks. I melted an Ack the other day. Like, please, stop. Cease. Do not want. I do not consent to this. Oh, God. So, yeah. I just tell people these days you're probably likely to get Ack. You'll get him, eventually. Doesn't matter if you're trying to get him or not, you'll get him. Oh, well, thanks for coming. Thanks for chatting, guys. And, yeah. Follow me, like, subscribe on YouTube. I upload videos pretty much every day. Yeah, I know. Which is funny, given that he's a dodgy backyard doctor. Or dodgy garage doctor. Not even a doctor. He's not even qualified. He's a quack. I upload the contingency contracts every day that they're out. I try to get them out as early as I can. So there's that. I also have the paradox simulations uploaded. It's for you guys that may be struggling with some of the paradox simulations. So yeah, it's usually just uploaded on YouTube, all my Arknights stuff. So if you're looking for Arknights content, my YouTube channel is the place to find it. Typically leave Twitch for just, you know, everyday streaming or doing little things like today. But yeah, every like, every follow, they're all appreciated, guys and gals, and so is you guys and gals being chatty, because it gives me someone to talk to while I'm sitting here crapping on. Plus, I like, when I'm talking about Arknights operators, I do like to have a chat about it, see what people think about different operators. I like to hear the different takes on operators. Because, I mean, sometimes people use operators in a way I never thought of, and I nick that. I nick those ideas. Make them my own. So thank you all for coming. I will be streaming again tomorrow. I was expecting this to take a lot longer, and I was going to split this in two, but that hasn't happened, so I'm not sure what I'll be doing tomorrow. So, yeah, same time tomorrow. Tune in, lads and ladettes. I hope to see you there.